Hi everyone and welcome back. So I've been lucky enough to live and work in a number of different countries over the last 5 years, actually 5 to be exact. And I get a lot of questions asking me how others can find a job abroad, how others can live abroad, and a lot of things about the whole process. Now obviously this is what I tried to make videos about, but I thought that today I could focus a bit more on my experience of how I made it possible for myself to move to these different countries and find work experience there. As I always say, I'm very much about sharing my experience so that hopefully I can provide resources, inspiration, show you how that could be possible for you too. But not only my story, but what I've seen other people doing there too. So I'm going to start with the UK, move on to Paris, France, then Padova, Italy, moving on to Lisbon, Portugal, and ending up in Brussels, Belgium, which is where I am today. Before we go any further, thank you very much to Send My Bag for sponsoring this video and making it possible. Send My Bag is a service which operates all around the world and lets you send your bag literally door to door across different countries, which means that you save on the fees of taking suitcase and luggage with you on the aeroplane, not to mention the stress it saves of having to lug your luggage across public transport and onto the plane. I've mentioned Send My Bag numerous times in other videos. Sendmybag.com, sendmybag.com, sendmybag.com. So I hope that just goes to show that it's a service that I really do love and use. And I really think that it could help you guys out. Check out the link in the description and see how they could help you. So the first country, as I said, is England in the UK, and I think it's important I tell you a bit about what I was doing there, because that definitely plays into the context of how I created these other opportunities. Now, as a young girl growing up in the UK, I didn't already have it in my head that this was the path I wanted to follow and I had to follow, that I wanted to move abroad and work for myself. There were seeds being planted there, but the things that I was doing along the way weren't necessarily as strategic. They were just what I wanted to do at the time. I mean, things like being born in the UK, I couldn't have planned for. I was lucky to have English as my native tongue, a strong passport, to be part of the European Union at the time, and to be born into a country that had an education system that let me do things like study languages. So that's the first thing I want to mention. I studied French and Italian at university, which is obviously the languages that I then went to go and live in the countries of. And another thing I was doing around my time at university was doing lots of internships. I was doing a lot of internships around digital marketing. I started my own blog. I was organising events in my city for other bloggers and basically developing skills that not just anyone would have from the outset. And this meant that when it did come time for my year abroad was something that I had to do because I was doing a languages degree, I had skills that were appealing to employers for internships in different countries. So that takes me to Paris. When I was 20, I went and did an internship in Paris. And actually during my 6 months in Paris, I did 2 internships. So this is your first gateway into an experience abroad, studying abroad. I had the option to either study at a different university or to do an internship with a company or teach English. And these are things that, depending on your university and your home country, you might have access to as well. Another option to something like the Erasmus program, which is a shorter stint abroad like I did, is actually doing your whole degree abroad. But of course, the other reason that I would really recommend doing an internship abroad, depending on what your interests are, is that it could potentially lead to a job offer afterwards. Now that's in no way guaranteed, but I was lucky enough to be offered a job after doing an internship in Paris. I decided to turn it down, but that's another story. And I know a couple of other people who also got offered jobs at the places they interned too. How did I find my internships? Great question. The first one I found because it was advertised through my university. A lot of universities actually have public databases with potential internships, companies that are looking for interns, so it's worth searching for some of those. And the way that I found my second internship was just searching on job websites like Indeed.com. So my next destination was Italy, and to be honest, my 6 months of Erasmus in Italy were somewhat similar to my Paris experience in the way that I found my job. I actually found it through a friend this time. But I think what's more interesting to tell you about is when I moved back to Italy after I finished my degree. So this was my first experience as being a real life adult, having to navigate living in a different country, finding a job without the support system of my university there. I'm going to talk about 3 different approaches, that I personally took when I was in Italy. Now the first one is being completely optimistic, going to the country and just working it out when you're there. However, I didn't do this completely blind. I had a couple of plans that I knew I was going to try and follow, to make sure that this living situation was sustainable. And of course, I spent months doing research about if I would need any visas, all of the bureaucracy behind it. And even then, there were still some surprises along the way. So you definitely can't be too prepared, even if you're going in with an optimistic outlook. So as part of my optimistic outlook, these were my two approaches. English language teacher. Now, being a language teacher, depending on your circumstances, could be a good option for you, and this is how a lot of people finance and facilitate their life abroad, particularly English native speakers. If you're lucky enough to have a native language that is in demand in other countries to be taught, could be a good route for you. I was lucky because I'm a native English speaker. I've got a very agreeable accent for teaching. I had studied languages, and I even did a TEFL course before I moved to Italy, and that's basically a certification to say that I was certified by a recognised board to teach English as a foreign language. So that meant that for my first few months in Italy, I was able to do a couple of freelance teaching jobs just to buffer up my bank account while I worked out what I really wanted to do and make that happen. That thing that I really wanted to do and make happen was freelancing as a social media manager. Freelancing and entrepreneurship has a big role in my story, and I know it's not for everyone. Like I said, I'm just sharing my experience, and I'm going to throw in other ideas along the way. But as a European citizen, I was able to move to Italy, get my residency there, and register myself as a freelancer. But even though I kind of ticked all the boxes to say that I qualified for taking this route, it was still a very long process. It did cost some money along the way, so it's not a quick fix by any means. But having said that, within a year of moving to Italy, I was full-time freelancing as a social media manager. A lot of that was down to my kind of drive. The way that I sort of made it happen was I was actually applying for internships to do with social media because I thought that would be my way to get my leg in the door and meet contacts and find potential clients and just get more experience. But lucky for me, one of the internships that I applied for and never heard back from reached out to me a few months later and said they were looking for a freelance social media manager. Honestly, it couldn't have worked out much better for me in that sense. And from there, I had someone who took me on, and that was my first client. But after spending a couple of years in Italy, I decided I wanted to move on. I still wanted to be doing my entrepreneurship freelancing thing, but I wanted to travel more. When I went to Lisbon, I was in the process of kind of reorganizing the structure of my freelance business. So when I was there, I was concentrating on networking, and I met a lot of people who in some form were doing digital nomadism. So this takes me on to another option. If you don't know, a digital nomad is somebody who has a location independent job. That could be having their own business, freelancing, or even working for another company. When I went to Lisbon, I was in the process of kind of reorganizing the structure of my freelance business. So when I was there, I was concentrating on networking, and I met a lot of people who in some form were doing digital nomadism. Slightly dodgy way, just about where you're setting up your business, where are you paying your taxes, how long are you spending in each country, what are the laws and legislations there about working, even if you do have a remote job. I met people who would freelance in their home country, get up enough money to go traveling for a few months and then go and do that. I met people who were creating startups in Lisbon, in Portugal. But then on the other side of things, I met people who were doing normal desk jobs, who had perhaps worked for an international corporate company in their own country and then had applied to transfer to a different country and had ended up in Lisbon, Portugal. So all of these are routes that you could consider taking as well. And I think for those of you who are looking for a more traditional route, perhaps looking for starting to work in an international corporate in your home country and then starting to apply for roles with them that would take you to international branches could be a great idea. Equally, I've met people and I have friends who have just kind of skipped getting the job with the company in their home country and started applying directly for the jobs in other countries. A lot of people do that, for example, in Brussels, Belgium, where I live now, because there is a really thriving international community. It's the home of the European Commission and the European Parliament. So in particular, a lot of people from the member states of the European Union will apply directly for jobs in associations that are operating out of Brussels, Belgium. So that segues me quite neatly into my final destination, location, which is Brussels, Belgium, where I live and I am based now. This is probably the most secure setup that I've had through the whole time, just because I've been doing this for a few years now and I'm starting to pick up some tips on how to do it, but it's also probably the most complicated. So essentially, I set up my company in the United Kingdom, where I am from, where I'm still a citizen, and I set up my company as what's called a limited company. That means that it's a legal entity within itself. If someone sues me, then I can lose my business money, but I couldn't lose my personal money or assets. Now, another reason for doing this is because I don't have to reside in the UK to have the company there. I'm the only person working for the company, but I am based in Brussels, Belgium, and I have registered so that I am legally allowed to operate out of Brussels. It's complicated and I'm not going to go into the details, but essentially I am paying my corporate tax for my company in the UK, where the company is headquartered, and I am paying my personal taxes in Brussels, Belgium. And then I also have to pay something called cotisation sociale, which is just if I'm working as an independent worker in Brussels, that's another fee I have to pay. So it's definitely not a cheap option. It really depends on your perception of cheap as well. But it is a very real thing that you need to keep in mind, is that if you decide to take the entrepreneurship route, freelancing route, and you're not planning on staying in one country as your base for a really long time, then expenses like this could come up. The reason I'm doing this is because I don't see myself staying in Belgium for more than 2 or 3 years. It's definitely not somewhere I want to live in the long term, but for now I do want to stay here and I want to have a base here and be a resident here, which means I need to be paying my taxes here. Are you still with me? But I hope that just illustrates to you how this isn't a solution that's being advertised, but after doing tons of research, considering what I really wanted to get out of this setup, I found that this was going to be the best solution for me right now. It costs a lot to set up a company in Brussels, in Belgium, and I don't know how long I'm going to be here for, so that's not an expense that I want to take. Equally, when Brexit happens, I'll have to reassess. I'm not looking forward to that, so we'll just see what happens when that time comes. That really brings me to the end of the video, and like I said, I wanted to share my experiences with you just to show you what is possible. I didn't have this exact route mapped out from when I was at university and then calculate it. A lot of it was problem solving and trying to come up with creative solutions along the way. And I think whether you want to be an entrepreneur or not, when it comes to living abroad, there are so many bureaucratic obstacles that are going to come up and frustrations, and that's not me trying to put you off, it's just me preparing you for the fact that you need to be ready to be independent and be a creative problem solver. And that's why when I get emails saying, help me to find a job abroad, if I reply at all, I honestly just refer people to job websites and things, but these are the kinds of things that you need to be ready to go out and find out yourself, because there's going to be so many times along the way that you're going to just have to get creative, ask around and work out how to do it for yourself, because every situation is unique. So I really hope this gives you a starting point to kind of assess where you're at. What skills do you have? Where are you from? What's possible with different visa agreements in different countries? And hopefully come up with a solution that's really tailored to you, you're really happy with. It's definitely not an easy lifestyle to pick, but I think it's worth it. I mean, it's not just about living in a different country. I love that, but I also love the freedom that the side of working for myself gives me. Ironically, picking freedom of where I live and picking freedom from the way I work does bring up a lot of obstacles that make it a lot more difficult, but it's all about balancing what's most important for you, prioritizing, and going from there. So having said that, let's still help each other out in the comments. Share your experience of how you were able to move abroad, or tell me about how you're planning on moving abroad. I can't promise that I'll be able to consult each of you individually, but I think as a community we can really help each other out. And if you are going to be moving abroad soon, or you're taking a long trip somewhere soon, then of course check out the Send My Bag link in the description below. I think it could save you a lot of money and just be a real help. With that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. If it's your first time here, my name's Emily. I am an entrepreneur, a traveller, a filmmaker, and I share videos all about my experiences of living and working abroad. So if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in my next one. So best of luck, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!